welcome back to Liquid Lunch. It's me, Hugh, and Jen is my co-host today.
Hi.
And now we've got Christopher Oliphant and Ronna Smithrim joining us, and of course they've written that incredible book, Accepting the Radical. And what the real message there, guys, is that you cannot be fixed, right? I don't know if that's good news or bad news, but we're going to get into it today, and especially around relationships. Right, guys?
That's right.
I'm already excited.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you I founded a political party called the Radical Moderate.
Ah.
Yeah.
That sounds like a oxymoron. I mean, I know we kind of talked about this the last time you guys were here, but the idea that, because most people, if they're going to buy a book like this, it's because they're trying to deal with some problem that they have in their lives, and they are probably assuming that there's something that needs to be fixed. But you guys are, I guess, bringing the good news that we don't need to be, nor can we be.
Well, it's not that we don't need to. Yes, there are changes we'll want to make in our life, but this idea that we can take a magic pill, wave a magic wand, do some little magical therapy, and suddenly all my problems have gone away is...
I'm going to be different.
It's an illusion, and it's false. And what we find is that people come in feeling damaged. Mm-hmm. And when we can say, hey, you are who you are, let's work with that. Let's accept you for who you are. Instead of trying to fix who you are, let's accept who you are. And then from that acceptance, what new choices can you make? So if for example, you come in and you say, I'm abusing drugs. And we say, okay, well, let's accept that. So drugs are an important part of your life. They're probably serving a purpose. They're helping you cope in some way. Let's start there. All right. Now, once you can accept that addiction is a part of your life, they are helping you cope, they are serving a purpose, maybe the next time you want to make a different choice. Maybe there's another way you can help cope, another strategy for solving the problem that the drugs were solving. So by accepting, we actually open up new choices and new abilities to make different decisions about how I act.
This seems to be really in line with some kind of conventional current psychology in terms of cognitive behavioral modification and the idea of actually looking at how you act and working towards finding a way to make that better. But I like the idea of actually starting at a position of acceptance instead of starting at a position of you're really broken. We got to fix you. We got to retool you and make you like. And then the question is, what are they trying to make you like? Are they trying to make you like a certain model that everybody is supposed to fit into? Because I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. Yep. And there's a lot of similarities between the work we do and CBT and so on, and so many other modern therapies. Yes, very much so.
Now, do people have to come to this in a certain frame of mind?
We get people arriving in all sorts of frames of mind, from help fix me, make this go away, to something not quite working in my life, how can you help me live more creatively and effectively? And in both cases, we're going to start with, all right, let's see who you are, let's work with that, let's move away from you are damaged into you are who you are, and how can we then, through that acceptance, make your life more effective, make it less dysfunctional, and allow you to move forward in a way that's more creative and more in line with the goals you have and who you are as a person.
Okay. Now, I know that you brought the cards again, and I know Jen is intrigued by the cards.
I'm also entirely unaware of what I'm getting into if I ask you if I do the cards.
Now, and I know today too, really, we're concentrating on relationships.
Right.
So, I mean, should we do the cards? Is that a good kind of segue to talking about the relationships, or what's the best way to explore this, do you think?
Well,
Want to talk about how screwed up my relationships are? Because that's a good subject, I suppose.
so why don't we talk about a little bit about
Fertile
relationship,
ground, perhaps?
and then we'll pause and do a card and maybe return to relationship.
Sounds great.
Okay. What we're trying to do in our relationship work is start from the premise that Your relationship is fine. Your beliefs about what it should be are what are causing your problem. We have been fed a series of lies fed to us by Disney films, by romance novels and romance films, by porn films, by society at large. We're being fed basically a crock. And we want to say, hey, if you challenge the lies, you're actually going to find your relationship working better. Instead of trying to somehow fit your relationship into a series of fantasies and lies and wonder why it's not working.
Now, these could be any relationships, right?
Yes, we're talking primarily about intimate relationships,
Like-
regardless of sexual orientation. But it can also work for friendships, work relationships, because again, we have these expectations about how we're supposed to be, how the person we're in relationship with is supposed to be, and these fantasies about this wonderful state that's going to be instead of the realities of the very human struggles it is.
No, I was just going to say, too, besides those other things that you mentioned that influence us, like we have, for example, in marriage, like that's a role, right? Well, that's funny that you're laughing. I want to hear about that. But it's a role that our society has kind of imposed on this particular relationship that for thousands of years, right?
Right. A role that was intended for protection of the family, raising of children, and in many ways is no longer relevant. Most people, many of our clients are choosing not to tie the knot, per se, as an expression. And some are. There's still an archetypal energy around this idea of marriage. It's why same-sex marriage has been so important for many homosexual couples, because there is something unique about the word marriage and the act of publicly proclaiming a commitment to each other. And it's no longer needed in the ways that it was 1,000 years ago.
Right. So its role itself as an institution in the culture may be up for revision or something.
Sure. There's a song I remember out of my era where we're heading to the chapel and we're going to get married.
Yeah.
And what's that line? I'll never be lonely again.
Wow. So 50% of the time that could be true, maybe?
Maybe, if you're lucky.
Maybe?
Shoot for 10, you'll be good.
Right.
Kind of reminds me of the love scene from Team America World Police. Okay. Let's,
Well, I was thinking of just the idea of if we don't feel in love, then somehow the relationship is damaged, that somehow we're not in a relationship with the right person. I think of the Gordon Lightfoot song, If You Could Read My Mind. Something's gone wrong, the feeling's gone, I can't get it back, so we have to split.
Right.
Instead of the feeling's gone, that's perfectly normal, because feelings, like any feeling, come and go. How do we work now from this place, instead of it being this wonderful, I'm in love with you, everything is great, into, wow, you're this horrible person I married. Now what am I going to do?
yeah, it's too late.
We really seem to get fed that concept that it's only the most extreme kind of emotion that we can call love, that it's only that intense physical attraction, intense mental interest, that if we don't want to be with that person at every moment of every day, then there's something wrong.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you can't live in that state. Yes, it's a wonderful state. We enter into at the beginning. We meet this person. We fall in love. The sex is great. Everything's great. This person completes me in so many ways. And then real life happens.
Right.
And the things that I fell in love with, I now can't stand. So the person who was spontaneous is now irresponsible. The person who was dependable is now boring. The person who was artistic is now flighty. It's so reality sets in. Now
Right.
what do you do? And that's where we want to begin to say, instead of saying, oh, there must be something wrong, I must be damaged, my partner must be damaged. Well, maybe the fantasies, maybe the beliefs that you're using to feed this are the problem.
So let's go through the chart a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Because
then we're gonna get onto the cards.
and I'm going to show it here.
I'm still
There's
safe
the
for a bit.
chart. And there's three columns. One is the lies. The second column is the realities, and the third column is the healthy foundations. I think maybe going through this might help people understand more about what
Sure.
you're talking
We'll
about.
take a few that are really important, and we'll go through them, and then we can do the cards.
Cool. I like this already. I mean, I just sped read the charts.
Sure.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, okay, where do we want to start
Well, I think
here?
you start from the very first one, the purpose of a
All right.
relationship.
The purpose of a relationship is to love and be loved.
No, that's the lie.
That's
right?
the lie.
But it sounds right to me. So.
I know.
I know. That's what we thought.
It's like the idea of having children so that somebody will love you unconditionally, and then you find out that children are people
Right.
Right. Who
have their own
who
ideas.
use you unconditionally.
Yes.
We've had 5 of them, so we know it well.
We
Can't
still
you-
haven't had an unconditional child. Yes.
So yeah, the purpose of relationship, well, the reality of the relationship is that 80% of it is going to be work and struggle,
Yeah.
and 20% of it will be love.
That sounds like a bad ratio.
It may be from our illusion or fantasy that relationships are supposed to be love and happy and wonderful.
Yeah.
But the
When you
reality
can
is,
accept the fact that the relationship is hard work and that those feelings are going to come and go, when you can relax into that, when you're in that 80%, you can just breathe and do your work. It's not about having to leave or
find some pill to get back to this love and be loved place.
In other words, it's just accepting that this is the way it is.
this is
Yeah,
it.
that's
It's-
right.
It's
Right.
hard work. I mean, anybody that's been in a long-term relationship knows how difficult it is. We say to folks that usually your first year, maybe 18 months if you're lucky, the romance stage, it's a great stage.
18 months. That's
Maybe
the-
18 months.
Enjoy it.
Enjoy it. It's
Yeah.
great. Then for the next 2 to 14 or 15 years, you're living in this 80%.
And then what comes after that?
And that's if you're doing your work consciously.
Right.
What
What comes
comes
after that? What comes after that is an ability to be together, watching the love come and go, watching the experiences come and go, without it being a big drama, without it being a big struggle, without the drama queen making it a big production, without blaming each other for what's going wrong. You can live and truly be far more intimate, far more vulnerable than you ever could in the in-love stage.
Do you think if we're conscious that this is what relationships actually do, that we can actually achieve that ratio quicker, that we can actually get out of that 80%, and so that the time, the years after that initial passion could actually be more?
What happens is it switches from we start out with this 100% we're in love. And
Right.
it flips into that 80%, and then if you are really conscious and you do the work, because the healthy foundation of this is the purpose of relationship is to have my buttons pushed.
It's not about love.
Because when I get my buttons pushed, I can do the personal growth work to move myself into a greater state of maturity.
Right.
And if you look at relationship from that perspective, then what happens is as time goes on, it goes, well, maybe 80%, and then maybe 40% and 60%, and then it flips back to maybe 60-40. And so there's this constant shift between moving into times of struggle and into times of that more contentment where I'm doing my work and it's not as dramatic, and then times where I'm back in love again. And these 3 states can really flip, with that 4th state being the commitment to do the work and the ongoing work that I do. So if I can look at it as relationship is designed, it's beautifully designed to encourage me to grow.
But we don't really want to grow, do we, Christopher?
Well, and that's the struggle. And if you don't want to grow, then there are ways out. You can simply spend your lifetime in conflict. You can spend your lifetime moving in and out of relationships, or you can play the peacekeeper and hit that dead end of, well, I'm just not going to fight anymore, but I really haven't achieved the intimacy and the connection that I was hoping for.
You know, I'm just wondering, maybe this is sort of one of the big problems with the culture as a whole these days, because
We're
of
lazy.
people. I mean, because what I'm saying is people don't really want to mature. They don't really want that. They want to have a good time. They want to take the easy way out. You know, they want to feel in love.
Yep.
You know, beyond the 18 months.
Yep.
And so people, instead of, it's almost like that maturity that you're talking about is almost a byproduct of just dealing with the crap that you got to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Right, and our book, Accepting the Radical, talks a lot about the wheel, and in the wheel, what it is about using all of life events as vehicles for growth.
Right.
Whether it's relationship or whether it's getting a ticket, it can all be used as vehicle for growth.
Now, I'm fascinated that you use the term pushing buttons, because that's typically that's used in a really negative way.
That's right.
You know, someone's pushing my buttons, and
It's your fault.
well, and always the person
Stop
who's the
doing it.
closest to you is the one who can push your buttons the best, because
That's
they're
right.
the ones who know you. They're the ones who have the history with you. They're the ones who know if you bring up that broken plate, it's going to cause stuff.
Right.
But the idea that you can actually push people's buttons or have your buttons pushed in a positive way is actually totally new to me, and I'm already embracing it. I really like this idea.
The buttons are going to get pushed one way or another. That's going to happen. That's a fact. What do you do with it? Do you go to the old patterns that aren't working, or do you try something new? Do you try to say, hey, this is the very function of why we're in a relationship. I can use that button being pushed as a vehicle for my growth,
Right.
and now it becomes my issue, not theirs.
Well, and it's great, too, because that means that even if the other person is not doing it consciously or doing it necessarily because they're doing it for your benefit,
No.
you can take a positive result from it.
That's right.
That's right. So it kind of brings us to our second one here, which is love is the glue that holds relationship together.
Which is the lie.
Right, that's the lie. Love does not hold the relationship together. It's our matching neuroses that hold the relationship together.
That will far outlast love. Far outlast love.
Does that mean if you're both conspiracy theorists, you probably got a winning combination?
Well, more often it's where one neuroses counters the other one.
Right.
So we're working with a couple right now. One partner really needs a lot of close attention time. Really a lot of, I need to know you're there, and
Text
there's a lot
me
of
and, yeah.
closeness. The other partner needs space. It's a perfect match.
It is?
It is.
It sounds
Perfect
like
match.
hell to me.
But that's what we create. That's what we're attracted to, and that's what will actually keep us together. We've had childhood crises. These childhood crises are what we grew up with and what we associate with love. So and you see this in the extreme cases in abused relationships, where so many abused partners were abused as children, and there's this very highly dysfunctional thing going on where abuse and love get
Right.
confused. And a lot of time we spend when working with abused couple is just to identify that and accept that that is a reality, so then they can begin to make new choices about how they want to act on that.
So does this mean that instead of thinking that we have to get past our childhood traumas, we can actually embrace them and find somebody who actually matches us that way and grow positively despite the fact we have our childhood traumas still in place?
Well, you're not going to get past your childhood traumas.
Our childhood traumas come with us, and we can work with that in the context of the relationship. But our childhood traumas will be with us.
This sounds so... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We've been working on our childhood traumas for 30 years. Constructively, actively, positively, for 30 years.
No luck.
They're still there. Now,
there.
we
I can
have a
work with-
lot more choices around how they act out in our lives.
Right.
But
Yeah.
they, under stress,
Yeah.
that's what gets activated. That's our security zone.
Right. I kind of think of this as the definition of civilization. It's not that we're animals with a thin layer of civility on top of us. What makes us civilized is that we fight the urges to do bad things because we've learned not to do bad things. We've learned to be better to each other and to society in general.
On a good hair day.
On a good hair day, exactly. But this is interesting. It's almost it sounds a little bit like the work of Alice Walker. The idea, because I know that she was big on the idea of looking at the child that you were, and also about forgiving the child for being too weak or too young or too inexperienced to deal with the things.
Well, and the child doesn't have the cognitive ability
Right.
or the power. I mean, a child does not have the power to prevent the most of the traumas that have happened in our lives.
Right.
So not only do we not have the ability to reason and rationalize and do that because our brains are not developed, we also do not hold the family power or the power with the teacher or whomever.
Right.
Are you talking about Alice Walker, the color purple Alice Walker?
Did I get her name wrong? Alice Miller. Alice Miller. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That I knew.
Thank
the
you.
name, right?
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
I call her Alice Monroe sometimes, and that's definitely not the right one. It's like all Alices are one Alice to me.
Want to draw a card?
Yeah, I want to draw a card.
Okay, here we go with the cards now. Okay, so maybe you can explain this, Christopher,
So
as we're
we're
going.
going to draw one card from each pile. So these cards are referred to as our background cards. So pick any one. I've done a little bit of shuffling, but it really doesn't matter. Okay.
Do I get to look at it?
You
or-
sure do.
You want to hold it up to
They're
the
all blank
camera
in the
there?
middle.
Oh, good. I saw that this was blank in the middle, and I was actually terrified for a second there.
So now we're going to draw a card to put in the middle.
Okay. Oh, this is great. Okay, so the two different sizes of cards. Oh, this one. Two different sizes of cards. So this one says attachment.
And
yes, it
balanced.
is. And the attachment balanced. And this one's to go in the middle. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so attachment and disengaged is going in the middle.
So in terms of your relationship and
Is
the
it-
things that you're attached to in your relationships, what it's saying is you have an ability to step back and observe. Disengagement can be shutting everything down and shutting everybody out, or it can be I am present, I am experiencing, and I don't need to get caught up in the drama of it.
Right.
And if you can do that in your relationships, and the observer is a wonderful gift to bring into a relationship when it's in its balanced state. Because that means that as the crisis emerges in the relationship, you can say, wait a minute, let me step back. Let me have a look at this. Let me take a breath. Let me figure out how to work with this, and then act.
So, and this is actually true. I'm not the kind of person who immediately in a fight starts bringing up the past stuff because my buttons are being pushed and I'm trying to hurt the other person.
Right.
I do tend to step back.
Yeah.
So with these cards, is this? Do you find that the cards actually do tend to relate to the person who draws them?
Often.
Because the cards are archetypes.
Okay.
And that's what the cards are based on. We have 48 different archetypes that we then modify with the background cards. And we all have all of these 48 archetypes. So regardless of which card you're going to draw, it will resonate with some aspect of your life. And there are times when it feels very synchronistic, and the card really is incredibly appropriate for the person in the situation.
Right. But because they're archetypes, it's actually going to be more likely that they'll hit us all at some level.
At some level.
That's really cool. Okay,
Plus,
so
plus with synchronicity, of course, you're always going to draw the right card.
And that's the interesting thing. Is synchronicity true, or is it that events happen and we attach energy to them and declare them synchronistic? I can't answer that. I don't know.
I guess at a quantum level, the very fact that we're doing something affects the outcome of what we're doing.
And
Except for CERN and the Mandela effect, that's changing everything.
But if you never looked at those issues, you'd never actually have to find an answer to those questions.
Right. Ask a question, get an answer. Right? So, guys, I mean, I know I don't know if it's going to be constructive to go through everything on the chart here, but let's just talk about, what is the application of this approach? Is this to help people who are in relationships? Is this the kind of work that you do, or some of the work that you do?
Yeah, we use this as a model and the foundation for couples to be able to change the dynamics of the relationship. So if we work from the perspective that every couple has at least one or two irreconcilable differences. So you are never going to solve your problems. You are always going to have that repetitive problem or problems that reoccur under stress. And when you can begin to accept that, rather than thinking that finding the root cause, so that, I didn't get my cookie when I was 3 years old, and that's why this is happening, and now it's not going to happen anymore. When we can deal with the reality that irreconcilable difference is going to be with us throughout our whole relationship, then we can develop new strategies on how to be with it and how to bring it into the relationship rather than having to fight against our partner to make something different happen, because that's not acceptance.
Right.
And if I need him to be different than who he is, then that's not acceptance either. Because he can't be other than who he is. If I have an expectation that Chris is going to become an extrovert, and enjoy going to parties,
You can push him out of the nest as many times as you want.
That's right. We're going to be fighting to the kingdom come, because that's not who he is. But if I can accept his introvert and accept and work with, all right, we need to go to this party. What kind of time can we have? What's going to be your comfort zone? And we can negotiate scenarios around those irreconcilable differences. Excuse me. So that foundation for couples to come back to commitment, what is it that you're committing to, and what are the principles of your relationship? And when you get derailed, to come back to that healthy foundation that you proclaimed, and how soon can you get back there?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, okay, save that if you could.
I will.
Because you guys are talking about you're going to get your buttons pushed.
Yep.
And that's actually just the way it is, and we're going to grow.
Right.
In fact, sounds like the more buttons we get pushed, the more we're going to grow. So my question is, because you can be in a relationship with somebody who's pushing your buttons, all the time, and you really don't want to be in a relationship with that person, right? So, how do we decide who we want to be in a relationship with? I mean, that might mean for a lot of growth, but you're not enjoying your life.
So we are not people that would suggest that all relationships need to be maintained regardless. There does come a point, both of us come from prior relationships. There is a point when what we call is showstoppers versus annoyances.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is a showstopper, and for example, 3 common ones are abuse, affairs, and addictions. So if those are really big, then you might say, hey, this really isn't working. If someone is constantly critical, constantly, there's no escape, and they're unwilling to take up and accept and look at how they're being critical. If you're the only one doing the work in the relationship and the other partner is just blaming you all the time, these may be reasons to say, hey, the basic building blocks to make this work just aren't in place. If both of you can be looking at these healthy foundations, so one of the things we were saying the other day to a couple was, any issue that arises is me. So you don't push my buttons. You act, and I react and say, hey, I reacted, that belongs to me. How can I work with that? And if I'm the only one doing that, then it becomes a very unpleasant relationship. Now, we do know a couple where that's true. He's not doing any work and she's doing all the work, and that works for her. So there's no absolute hard and fast rule. And if it's really not working, it's not working.
Right.
It's funny. My question was actually going to be kind of the flip side of that. What do you think are the essential, important elements that have to exist to keep people together? Is there some way of knowing whether you and your partner have something in common that's important, that's enough to work on?
Yes. Communication. Can you talk about the issues in a way and not take the conversation personally?
From the place of the adult.
So I can say,
Right.
hey, when this and this happened the other day, I felt really hurt. And that's my issue to work with.
Right.
Now, if I say that and you get defensive all the time,
And I say, why didn't you tell me at the time? This is not the right time to bring this up.
right, and there's no ability to communicate and be able to share what's going on inside of me, your partner's unwilling to communicate and share what's going on inside of them, then I'd say it's missing a key element. If there's inability to take ownership, yes, that happened, and I am sorry for what I did. Yes, I got angry, I responded in anger, and I apologize. If you can't both be able and willing to do that, then I would say that's a very important element that's also missing. So ownership, communication, a willingness to to look at relationship as a vehicle of growth. If you have those three elements in common, then I would say you have the three elements to make any relationship work.
That's fantastic, because that's honestly, that's almost the reason that I tell people that I don't do relationships right now, is because I only want to be in a relationship with another adult.
And as you were saying earlier,
Very challenging.
it's difficult to find adults in this culture.
Well, I'm optimistic that maybe the work that you guys are bringing to the table here today might be able to help that situation, at least for some of the people who might be watching this. Like, now today we're just talking about relationships, but so as you mentioned, so people that are having some trouble with the relationships, you guys can help them with this approach?
Yep.
We have, and we have had, we were doing a weekend intensive many years ago, and a couple arrived that were saying, we need help to end this relationship.
Yeah.
And by the end of the weekend, they were like two teenagers in love and stayed very much committed to each other. He died about 10 years later, but for that entire 10 years, there was a new commitment and a new dedication to each other. Seeing each other as humans instead of this person who was destroying my life
Right.
made a totally transforming difference.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't change, they didn't become different people, but they were far more willing to be with this person and work through the issues. And that was just one weekend.
I like what you were saying earlier about how what I took away from something came up earlier was that somebody's characteristic can be positive or negative just depending on where you're standing and how you're looking at it. So
Yeah, it's very perceptive.
yeah, and that's kind of wonderful, because there obviously was a reason why you were with the person in the first place. If it was just how they looked or what physical property they brought to the relationship, you're probably in a bad. You're probably always going to be in a bad place if that's what you base your relationships on.
If that's the only thing you have, then yes, there's nothing to grow on.
It's like, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Queen of Versailles.
No.
It was actually about a couple that was that did very rich couple who didn't know that they didn't like each other until they lost their money.
Right.
And it was a fascinating documentary where the filmmaker was actually around them when they lost their money, already making the documentary about them building the largest private home in the United States. And watched them grow to understand that they had nothing in common, and their entire relationship had been built on their physical possessions.
But maybe they could have just stayed together and pushed each other's buttons until they were super mature.
Well, it was interesting. You kind of learned that they were both fairly childish, and I'm not sure what capacity they had, but they both grew a lot out of it.
Wow,
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we're always talking about, people growing apart. And it sounds like if they're willing to communicate, that might not be a necessary thing. That if they're growing at all, if they're both growing, there might be a way to grow together.
You see, growing apart is based on that fantasy.
Right.
We have to be in love, we have to be like this all the time. Well, there are many times that Ronna and I don't feel love for each other. And that has allowed us to grow closer, not apart. Because we don't need to feel love.
Right.
And just to go back to what you were saying a moment ago, Hugh, around pushing each other's buttons, I just want to clarify that a bit. It's not that most of the time, we do not intentionally go out of our way to push our partner's buttons. We just go about our day, and whatever action or whatever I'm saying is getting interpreted, and Chris will react, or I will react, and the button gets pushed, and it's being done unconsciously, and it's going through their filter. So it's not like I wake up during the day and say, okay, now what buttons can I push today that is going to get Chris going for my personal growth. It's about when it arises from the unconscious, when our buttons get pushed unconsciously, then it gives us the opportunity to go inside and do our work.
That's why we say that you don't push my button. You're being you. My button getting pushed is a result of me, my history, and my issues. That's why it's mine, not yours.
Can I give you an example and see how you might deal
Sure.
with it? I've known a lot of couples over the years who get into trouble when one of the partners is suddenly becoming more successful than the other. And despite the fact that the partner who's less successful wants to be supportive, what they end up feeling is very jealous. How would you go about talking a couple through that kind of issue?
Well, again, we begin with who are you as individuals? What do you bring in? How does money and sense of value, how are those connected in your life, in your psyche? So if value and money are related and connected, is that a connection you want to keep? Is that a connection that you want to drive your life? Or are you able to say, my value can come from other sources? Now, the need to get value from sources isn't going to change, but you can make choices about what those sources are. So it can be money. It can be comparing myself to others, so I have to earn more than you, more than my partner, more than 50% of the people of the world. Or it can be, am I doing my work in a way that is self-honoring? And can I use that as a way of finding value in myself?
Right.
And if that's the case, then I can begin to look at the issue of money and how I get value out of that and make new choices.
So that would be for the partner who would be the less successful. How would you get the person who's actually doing really well and wants to enjoy that? What would you talk to them about?
Same thing.
Same thing?
How are you connecting money and fun, or money and value, and money and self-worth? And how are these connected for you? And are those the choices you want to make? Are you really now more important or better than your partner because you're earning more? And is that a choice you want to make?
Right.
Okay, guys. Well, listen, it's been great to have this conversation, and I think you've given all of us some food for thought and perhaps inspired some couples out there who might be having some difficulty to reconsider their approach, or maybe they're going to feel they're going to need to check out your website, or maybe come and see you or something like that.
Well,
The
we're
pleasure
available
coming
at
down.
radicalacceptance.com.
And you've got the book, right?
Yep, the book.
The book
the
is
cards.
there, and you've got the cards and the archetypes. And
Me?
are you giving any seminars or anything like that coming
We
up? Can
have.
people check?
There is
stuff
a
out?
seminar coming up. We're planning a weekend intensive, and trust me, these are intense.
Yeah.
For later in August. We have an introductory evening in July, and we will be updating the website with those events. And check it out, radicalacceptance.com.
All right. Okay, Christopher Oliphant and Ronna Smithrim, thanks for coming in again today.
Thank you.
And we're going to take a little quick break here on Liquid Lunch. Come back with the band Simple Damn Device with some live performance. It's going to be pretty cool. So stick around. We'll be right back.